this to work. Creating an ESE Parent Rep program for inclusive advocacy. This is a presentation that will actually be taking place at the Florida PTA Leadership Convention in July. So if you are attending that conference, you can come by and say hello. I don't know exactly what time or where this presentation will take place. If you're watching this live or on video, you may not need to come to the presentation because you've seen most of it. I am going to update this before the convention in July, just because there's some things going on between now and then will be very helpful. But nonetheless, we're very excited to share this with the entire state of Florida PTA and a program that we're doing here in Hillsborough County. And we'll get more to that in a little bit. So let's officially get started. Thank you for joining me for the Creating an ESE Parent Rep program. This is kind of the culmination of our spring workshop training series. We started with representing ESE families at our PTA meetings. We got into creating autism-friendly events with our PTAs. Last month, we got into leadership and advocacy, the ways you can get involved and join leadership, things like joining your local PTA, running for board positions, the parent-school partnership program, the Superintendent's Advisory Council, and so forth. And so now we're going to get into kind of what I'm hoping we have some momentum going forward, which is creating this ESE Parent Rep program. And this is something that does exist in schools around the county. Some of them call it something different, but something we've been working on with PTAs for a little while now. So you're seeing it kind of branch out. And what we're trying to do is not only bring more people into it, but connect all of us together so we can share our successes. We can share the things, issues that we're running into and kind of solve those together. So my name is Will Haynes. I am the Vice President of the Hillsborough County Special Education PTA. I'm also the local parent rep at my son's school and someone who's helped grow this program from a tiny spark into something I think can be real and very important across our district. This presentation is a collaboration between this Hillsborough County Special Education PTA, the Superintendent's Advisory Council for the education of students with disabilities, and the Hillsborough County Council PTA, all of those working together to empower and motivate, encourage our local leaders to step up in advocacy and leadership and really make a difference. In today's session, we're hoping to help you know everything you need to know to get started to launch, support, and sustain an active and successful ESE Parent Rep program at your local PTA, or maybe even across the district, if that's something that applies to you. You're going to leave with clear steps, practical tools, and a fresh perspective on what inclusion can look like, no matter where you're starting from. So you may be watching this video or attending this session as a parent who's never been active in your local PTA, or the board member who has your hands in everything that happens at your school and anywhere in between. We're going to talk about structure, strategy, and how to respond when people say things like, well, we don't really need this, because yes, you do. So what we're going to cover, PTA's role in inclusion, why it matters now more than ever. What is this Parent Rep program? How to get started from scratch, practical event and communication strategies, handling common challenges and objections, and tools and resources that can help move things forward. And just as a reminder, our shared mission in PTA is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. And that's something I share this in every workshop because it is extremely important. The advocate for all children. And as we've discussed before, if we are not advocating for our ESE families, our students with disabilities, our students who have special needs, and all those folks, then we are not fulfilling PTA's mission of advocating for all students and all children. And of course, PTA's values, collaboration, commitment, diversity, respect, and accountability. And all of those things hopefully will take place in this session. So let's jump into something. Inclusion matters now more than ever. If you've been paying attention to what is going on around the country, you're seeing national and state policies that are scaling back or trying to remove diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in public education. And no one has a crystal ball. We don't know how this is all going to play out, but we see there are efforts trying to dismantle and remove programs and policies that promote diversity and inclusion. And school districts they're going to be hesitant to speak up. There's threats of losing funding. There's all kinds of things out there that might keep them from stepping up against some of these new ideas. But PTA does not follow those same rules. We do not have to back off. In fact, it is our mission. The point of PTA is to advocate for all of our children. And that means we may be the last remaining effort to ensure that our kiddos are being included, that we are celebrating diversity, that we are welcoming neurodivergent children and children who might just need something a little different to feel welcome. And the ESE Parent Rep program is one way that we can show PTA's values, not just say them, not just put them on a presentation, but to show what advocacy looks like at the ground level, whether it's at a fall festival, in your monthly newsletter, or at the school dance. So inclusion, as you can see on the screen, is not guaranteed in schools right now. Luckily here in Hillsborough County, they're not giving in, but the pressures are big and we don't know what's gonna happen. And PTA may be the last standing voice. So your mission, if you choose to accept it, and I hope you will, is to really advocate for these students and these families, because if we don't, there may not be anyone else who will. So when we get into what is ESE, so you've attended these sessions, we talk about this a lot, we've defined it a couple of times, but you still may not be entirely sure. In different states, they might call it something different. You might have heard it referred to in different ways. But here in Florida, ESE is what we call exceptional student education. And this includes a pretty big umbrella of students. It includes students with disabilities, like those with IEPs and 504s, developmental delays. It even includes gifted students. So those are wrapped up all into one because they have different needs than maybe your neurotypical, I hate to say average, but kind of the typical student. Every school has these ESE students in one form or another. And every PTA serves ESE families, whether we know it or not, we should be, and we are. And our job is not necessarily to become experts in educational law. You don't need a master's degree or a doctorate in education or the legal system or any of those kinds of things. The job of the ESE Parent Rep, as we get into, is we're really just making sure families have a way to be part of the school community in regards to what the PTA is doing and the conversations that shape it. And in Florida, ESE includes things like, just to run off, not a complete list, but some ideas. So gifted, intellectual disabilities, autism spectrum disorder, speech impairments, language impairments, orthopedic or other health impairments, traumatic brain injuries, visual impairments, emotional or behavioral disabilities, specific learning disabilities, things like dyslexia, developmental aphasia, deafness, hard of hearing, dual sensory, apraxia, developmental delays, like the list goes on. So it's a really big umbrella. So an ESE student could be someone with, extreme needs who have, in self-contained classrooms, have one-on-one aids, up to those gifted students that could be the next Doogie Howser. So it can really be anywhere in between. So when we talk about these ESE families, we are talking about a very broad group of people that certainly deserve to be represented in the PTA. So why does this program exist? What is this all about? While I can't speak to the exact history of this program in Hillsborough County, I do know that it was something that the Superintendent's Advisory Council for the Education of Students with Disabilities kind of came up with a few years ago, let's say 4 or 5 years ago. And the current HCC PTA president partnered with the Advisory Council saying, hey, we have access to the local PTAs. Let's work together to make this happen. And unfortunately, what would seem to happen year after year is there'd be a big push in the beginning of the school year. Hey, let's do this ESE Parent Rep program. Let's get people invited on a board, and they would send out surveys or flyers, and they would have this information available. And local units, local PTAs would say, this sounds great. We want to do it. And they might come to a meeting. They might read some information. And then that was all that happened. And every year, it would kind of fall flat. It would dissolve and fizzle away. What we learned last year was the main thing that was going on is that they didn't know what to do. Unlike any other position on your PTA, this isn't something you can hand over a binder that says, here's how to do this job. We're talking about creating something from scratch, something that has not existed or doesn't exist in the schools naturally. And you would maybe recruit a volunteer, but they weren't sure what to do or what they were allowed to do or how it worked. And so eventually it just kind of fell apart. So last year we came to the realization that we needed to actually supply and provide tools, training, support that would help you get started. And that's what this presentation is going to help cover today. We did something last year around April, about the same time of year, a big training kind of like this, and we had a lot of schools jump on board. And then of course things kind of fall off. And we are working to correct those kinds of issues. And because PTAs, your board is changing every year. You're having elections every year. And so you may have a board that's really on fire. They love this idea. And then their kids move on from 5th grade to 6th grade or 8th grade to 9th grade. They're going from middle school to high school or something along those lines. And so they move on. And the next person who steps in, next board, not as excited about it, or they don't understand it. And so we want to help create some consistency, which is why we're changing our approach just a little bit about how we're recommending that we do this. So anyway, the official definition is to increase inclusion of all families at the school level by having an ESE Parent Rep bridge the gap in communication and involvement through building relationships with and among ESE staff, school level administration, ESE parents, and the general education parents. And the best part is now we have the Hillsborough County Special Education PTA. We're still working with the Superintendent's Advisory Council and the ACC PTA, but we are here to support your PTA and your parent rep so you don't have to figure it out on your own. We're here to help come over some of those hurdles. Because the reality is that families often feel left out at events. They feel uninformed about opportunities in the PTA and at the school. They feel overwhelmed or disconnected. Right, and that's where the ESE Parent Rep can come in. So when we talk about why we need this, we're talking about improving communication. We're talking about strengthening connections. We're talking about providing peer support and a shared voice for our ESE parents. We're talking about increasing family engagement from our ESE families, increasing involvement and participation, and ultimately enhancing a sense of community. Something I like to talk about as moving from awareness to acceptance. So and April is a great month. It's Autism Awareness Month, but being aware is the first step. We want to move on to acceptance and collaboration and inclusion. So what does an ESE Parent Rep actually do? So that's the question. When I was first asked if I would take on this role, I had two questions. Okay, what is it? And how much time is involved? And those are the questions that PTA volunteers are often going to ask when they're approached about doing something. Can you help lead this committee? Can you help plan this event? Can you help do whatever? What's involved and how much time is it going to take? Because, hey, we're all parents. We have, kids, we have jobs, we have families, our kids have activities, so we want to know what's involved. And so what does this parent rep actually do? The rep is really the idea that you're showing up at PTA meetings. You're listening and you're sharing needs of your community. You're asking those questions. Have we considered all the students in this plan? We're collaborating with staff to adapt our events and programs. We're learning from our ESE and our general education teachers what kinds of needs our student body has, what would help them be more connected and included. We're not talking about getting personal information or medical information. We're just getting a general sense of what would make this more inclusive. We are connecting families to resources. Here's the reality. Hillsborough County is huge. Our school district, I believe the last I heard, was 7th largest in the country, right? So we're talking a school district that is larger than some states in the US. And there's a lot of things going on. There are resources available from this organization and this organization. There's this event, there's that program, and it's hard to keep track of all of it. And so one thing that we can try to do as an ESE parent is get that information to families. It could be as simple as letting them know that the last Sunday of the month is Sunshine Sunday at the Glazier Children's Museum, which means they open early, tickets are less expensive, they turn down the lights and the sounds, and families can go enjoy the Children's Museum in a little bit more subdued pace. Right? That's something that happens every month. They let families do the same thing at, they have called Discovery Days at the aquarium. Even places like Chuck E. Cheese has sensory-friendly events. And so letting families know those exist. as well as letting them know about things like the special education PTA, that there is a group advocating for them and that we'd love their participation and involvement. Right? Representing the ESE community at meetings, building bridges and not barriers. An ESE parent rep does not need to have all the answers. You do not have to be an expert. Like I said, you don't need an advanced degree, but you do need to help be a connector. You want to be a presence to everyone in the room, that when we talk about advocating for all students, we mean all students, every student. And by being there and asking questions and making recommendations, you can help create the collaboration that will make the PTA, the events at the school and programs that you offer, more inclusive to all of the students. So let's jump into like how we actually get this started. So if your school, your PTA does not have something like this currently, there are two paths you can use to move forward. Two among many, but two of the main ones. So one of them I call the top-down approach. This is often ideal, but is not always possible, and it's okay. So top-down means that the PTA is initiating this program. The PTA is recruiting a parent rep. They are filling this from the top down. And that just means you're a board member and you're saying, we want to do this. It's no real difference than the board saying, we want to create a task force to participate in National PTA School of Excellence program, or it's creating a committee to help plan a fall festival trunk or treat, or creating a committee to help with fundraising, right? Your board can create committees and task force. These are not elected positions. They can appoint them, they can create them, they can dissolve them. That's what your board can do. So if the board wants to initiate this, they can. And that's ideal because it's much faster. Like they can just kind of make this happen and create that support. So that's top down. The bottom up approach is when the parents are interested in seeing this happen with their PTA, but the PTA itself doesn't know this exists. They don't know how it works. Maybe they're not quite interested yet, or they're a little hesitant. Then it's the parents who are leveraging and advocating, say, hey, we want this, we want this. And ideally, they're also volunteering to do it. One of the hardest things you can do as a PTA board member is someone comes to you and says, I have a really great idea. I want you to do it. And you think to yourself, like, I'm already running this event, this program. I'm doing this job, just on top of my own like personal responsibilities. I can't take on this new vision that you have. Like it's difficult to do, but to come in and say, I have an idea and I'm willing to head it up, or I have an idea, I'm willing to help you get it started. You're much more likely to get some movement when you are willing to help. But in any case, if you're starting from the bottom up, eventually you're kind of going bottom up to get the top down to happen. We're trying to convince your board to create this committee. And there's ways you can do it. Most of it's just talking to them, offering to volunteer to help make that happen. And there are times, we talked to some schools last year that the PTA was not quite interested, but the parents still wanted it. And you can kind of still do the same things. There's a few more roadblocks in the way, but you can certainly overcome them. And that's where, when we talked about representing ESE families at your meetings, you can do that without being an official committee. And eventually, when they see the value or the persistence, they may bring you on to help make those decisions. Regardless of which way you get started, whether you're coming from the top up or the top down or the bottom up, ultimately you're working with the school and the PTA to make this happen. And if your school doesn't have a PTA, then this is a great opportunity to start a PTA. That's something we can help you get connected to the right people, but the county council PTA would be who to reach out to for that, and they can help you get a PTA started at your school. You need 10 people who are willing to sign up, pay the dues, and you need a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. If you have 10 members and those 3 officers, you can have a PTA at your school. You can even have a PTA at your church or your daycare. Typically they happen at schools, but they can exist in a lot of different places. We're primarily talking about schools, but you can see the potential of where else these could go. All right, so what is our step-by-step launch plan? All right, so it's going to vary a little bit depending on your PTA, your board, your school, and the makeup of those things. But in general, we're going to be looking at adding a role or creating a committee. As I mentioned, committees are appointed by the board. They can just be created. Some boards may want to create like a vice president of ESE or something like that. That's a little bit more difficult because you may have to adapt your bylaws. You may have to have a vote from your membership. It's all possible. Something certainly you can do, but it's going to have a little bit more involved. Whereas a committee can just be created. And in PTA, there's a couple different, there's different terms that we use. We talk about standing committees. Standing committees are something that exists all year round. So if you have a committee that deals with teacher appreciation, that might be something that exists all year. You have special committees. Those are typically like short terms. You might have a committee that deals with a particular event, a fundraiser in the fall, or the holiday shop or something like that. You have a committee that deals with that. And so it's something that kind of just happens at one point. And you have task force. And those are kind of created to deal with a particular thing. And then those task force kind of go away. It's a lot of it's semantics. And the reality is you just need some kind of committee that has some ability to work with your PTA. But in any case, your board can create those. So we want to add this committee and have a committee chair. Once that is created, so I know we skipped a little bit, but we've convinced the PTA, the board, that this is necessary. This is something we want to do, and they agree. Maybe you volunteered to be the chair to get it started, or you know someone who would, or you help recruit someone to do it. So they decide yes. So the board votes, and the board says yes, let's add this committee. They appoint you as chair, for example. And so what we want to do next, and we'll get into more like the first 30 days kind of thing, but we're going to be meeting with our ESE specialists at the school or admin. Every school is a little bit different. At my son's school, we have 3 ESE specialists. There's one of them in particular who's kind of like the lead, not technically, but she's been there the longest. She knows more of the students. Ideal person to meet with. You can meet with all of them, that's even better. There are some admin who know more about what's going on in that world than others. Your school might be different. So you want to meet with those folks mainly to say, hey, we're doing this, like we're creating this committee, and I'm hoping to work with you to best serve our students. You're going to get a feel for what's happening at the school, what needs exist, and things like that. And that's here going to be like your main points of contacts for things on the school side. We want to announce the role and recruit interest. So it's important to let your membership know this exists. And whatever method works well for your PTA. So it might be sending out flyers, might posting on social media, putting it on the website, talking about it, and making sure that people know that it exists. And we want to recruit interest. We want to build a community. You'll find that I like to call it a ESE community as opposed to a committee. It sounds a little more warm and inviting. But we want to recruit that interest. And the big piece is that they have to come to you. So because of private medical information, diagnoses, HIPAA laws, and things like that, we cannot go into a school and ask them for a list of ESE parents and families and their contact information. We can't do that. Really, we can't do that for any group of people at the school, but even more so when it comes to this. So we can put the information out there and ask them to come to us. And that can happen through a variety of methods we'll get into in a minute. You're going to be attending PTA meetings, sharing resources, and ultimately building that community. The biggest piece is, if you remember, in every session we talk about asking that question, what can we do to make this more inclusive? Bringing concerns and ideas from our parents to the PTA when they're planning an event, when they're deciding on programs and the calendar for the year. We ultimately want the parent rep to be in those meetings. Now, it's possible you won't be. I was approached to do this at my local unit, and I was never invited to any of the actual board meetings where they plan the events. And so I was generally playing catch up with the event. So they would announce an event, and then I would come in afterwards saying, what can we do to make this more inclusive? What's this, this, and this? In hopes that we can make that happen. And that may be what you might be stuck in that for the first little bit, but as you prove that this is worthwhile, that you get feedback from families, hopefully they'll bring you more into the fold, right? And so the cool thing is that we also have a playbook on our website. There's a link at the end that has some tools you can use, things like letters that emails you can adapt and send to your principal or ESE staff and teachers saying, hey, we exist. Things you can send to families, and surveys you can send out to families to gauge their interest and what they need, and things like that. And we're constantly trying to add to that playbook. And if at any point you say, hey, there's a resource that I have and you want to share it, we'd love to include that. Or if there's something you would like to see that we don't have, let us know, and we can put that on our list, our wish list of things we're trying to create, so that we have that and can share with everyone. Ultimately, we would love this huge sharing place from different schools and PTAs that we can show what we're doing and people can benefit from that. But ultimately, the important part is it doesn't have to be perfect. You can start with what you have, because any step in the direction of being more inclusive is a great step in the right direction. So I have what I call the ESE Parent Roadmap, which kind of goes over the things a little bit what we discussed, but a little more in detail. These are kind of like milestones. It's not necessarily a linear order. I like this imagery. We're kind of climbing the mountain, but these can all happen kind of at the same time. So number one, we're talking about connecting with the school. Number two, we're talking about connecting with families. Number three, we're connecting information or sharing resources. And then finally, number four, we have building the ESE community. Let's look at each of those real quick. So connecting with the school. We talked about meeting with admin and staff and learning about what we can about the needs of the students. Again, we're not going to get specifics. They're not going to give us a list of names, but we can get a general idea. We can get a feel for, are we talking there's 5 students in our school that fall into the ESE category? Are we talking about 50? Talking about 500, right? That can make a difference in how we plan. We can get a feel for maybe not, there's 5 students who are identified as autistic and 5 students with apraxia and 5 students who have these delays. We're not going to get that information, but we can get a more general feel of, we do have students with mobility needs. We do have students with sound sensitivities. We do have students, right? We can get some of that general information. We want to get recommendations on connecting with parents. So again, they're not going to give us names. They're not going to tell us which students, but they can tell us potentially the best way to reach out to these folks, whether it's sending flyers or emails, whether it's posting on social media. Like, what are these families or what are these teachers and the ESE specialists? Are you kidding me? Sorry, my cat just stepped on my computer. There we go. Curious cat. They can help us, identify, and they might even be able to help you find, who might be a good fit to lead this or be part of it. And again, we're going to communicate through the ESE staff or through the teachers. It's going to be double blind because those parents have to come to us. It's very important that they're going to come to us. Once the parents self-identify or they come to us, then we can communicate back and forth with them. But until then, we're kind of just throwing things out into the ether and hoping that they respond. And that's okay. Number 2, connecting with ESE families. Here we're talking about using the PTA social media channels, the Facebook, Instagram, TikTok if you use it, flyers, websites, and morning announcements. Whatever it is that your PTA uses to communicate with families, we can use that to get information out there and to get information back. One of my favorite things is to use a survey, and one that we've used basically just says, are you interested in being part of this community? And if you are, then you have the ability to share with us your information. They can also fill it out anonymously. That's okay too. But we can start gathering information from families that way. In some cases, you might create a group, a contact list, a mailing list, a text chain, whatever it might be, something where you can have access to these folks and share information with them directly. This, I'm going to tell you now, is one of the hardest parts, because not every family is going to self-identify as fitting into this category. You might get feedback in anonymous surveys. You might get information from people specifically, but building an actual mailing list is difficult. This isn't the pass or fail of this program. It's something that we want to work on, and it's going to take some time. Now, in some cases, you may already have a pretty good network of folks at your school, and you can just say, hey, we're doing this. If you're interested, let me know. And they'll say, yeah, sure, that sounds fine. I've had much better luck just like talking to people that I know, because we have already met, we've shared things about our kids and things like that. And they say, yeah, I'd love to help out. But they don't respond to the surveys when they get posted. And that's gonna be the way it is a lot of times in PTA, unfortunately. That's okay, we can work with that. Talk about sharing info and resources. We want to pay attention to our PTA's calendar of events and make sure that we're sharing accommodation information about those events. If possible, we want to be proactive and say, hey, we usually do a school dance around Valentine's Day, and they're going to start planning that hopefully in like January, December, depending how earlier PTA works on things. Hopefully it's not the day before. So you might start asking those questions ahead of time. Hey, I know we did a Valentine's Day dance, a sweetheart dance last year. I got some feedback from families that said it was a bit too loud. Could we talk about adding a quiet space? Even if you're not officially on a committee, you can start asking those questions so that the people who are planning those events can at least consider it. As we talked about, oftentimes our PTA, our boards and event planners, they're not purposely excluding anyone. They're not trying to make things difficult. They just often don't think about it because they don't have to think about it. Families that have students with any kind of special support needs, we have to think about these kinds of things all the time. Is it going to be too loud? Is there going to be food available? Are there ramps to make access? Those kinds of things that we're constantly thinking about. We just have to bring that to the attention of the planners, the leadership. We can help create those FAQs. You know that I love those for event communication. Maybe we help make additional flyers that have that ESE specific detail that our families are looking for. We're not necessarily asking the board to do everything on their own. Like, we can help with this kind of stuff. We can also share community-wide resources. So again, everything like those Sunshine Sundays to maybe special needs resource fair, things like that come up. It might be the grand opening of a new speech center in town that's having a little festival. It could be really anything. Because as much as we all try to keep our fingers on the pulse of what's happening in the community, no one can keep track of it all. So if there's something especially that's close to you or something that's going to be very impactful, you want to share that. And a great place you can look for those. So USF Card, they have a wonderful Facebook page where they share different events. They run a lot of events, so that's helpful. So you can see different things that they are supporting and that they're throwing together. Also Fiddlers, they have a number of training sessions and programs. Easter Seals has some wonderful programs, everything from their parent training classes to the play project. So you can see different events on those places and just share them. You can sign up for mailing lists, all kinds of stuff. That is very helpful. And then also sharing things, information sessions, classes, training, etc. You're going to see some really cool programs out there, things like Planning for the Future or transition programs that exist for helping students with disabilities go, from school to the workforce. You may think, well, my kid's young, but there may be families that would love that information now, or they want to plan ahead, which is very beneficial. And the final step, top of the mountain, build the ESE community. This is when we're talking about increasing advocacy efforts and PTA involvement. We might even be planning our own events or planning events that work aside or with the general PTA events. I can envision schools that are creating now support groups where families are getting together during school to have coffee and just share what's going on, knowing that they have a network that supports them. It might even be things like sharing, hey, who are we using for babysitting? Where are we going to summer camp? What speech center has availability? Things like that, things that we can be sharing that as parents we often share anyway, but we can have something a little bit more focused. And these groups don't necessarily have to exist outside of the normal PTA channel. So it's not like you need a special, separate Facebook group. You might decide that's the way to go, but you might also say, we're just going to include this in our general communication. Because the reality is you may not know which families have not kind of joined this group, but would benefit from the information. And we might even start creating educational opportunities, much like these workshops that you're attending and watching. You might share these or create your own that help work with your particular school, your PTA, and the needs of that community. So there's some really cool things that we can do when we really start to build that community. All right. First 30 days. So what do we actually do? And we have a great tool in our playbook that helps with this. At this time of year, let's zoom out for a second on the calendar. Your local unit PTA, so we are at the end of April. Most local PTAs should be having their elections in April or May. Not all of them. Your bylaws are going to specify, but most of them do it towards the end of the school year. That means there's going to be a brand new board. Now, that might be the same people from last year. They might switch positions. There might be some new people, but generally speaking, you are going to have a new board that's going to come into place. And right now, they're going to start transitioning. So you have a treasurer they've done their 2 years. They can't run for treasurer again. There's a new treasurer. They're going to start handing over things, training them to take over. And every PTA is going to be a little bit different about exactly how that handoff works. Over the summer, you're going to see a variety of things happen. People are going to take a break, or they're going to start planning things. When it really starts to heat up is in July. So we have the Florida Leadership Conference. That's the second week of July, I believe. A A lot of PTAs across the state are coming to this. Here in Hillsborough County, we have a really good representation because it's on the west side of Orlando, so it's really not too far, at the Omni Hotel, which is pretty sweet. As a side note, a little plug, bring your families because there's some great swimming activities. They have like a wave pool, lazy river slides and things. And so, give them a little vacation away while you're in sessions, learning and getting encouraged to do some cool stuff. Typically after that convention is when PTAs are really going to start planning for the next year. Your principal and your president are going to meet together. They're going to start, planning. You're going to have your budget meetings, yada, yada, yada. So that's an ideal time. Actually, right now is an ideal time to really start dropping this as a hint. Hey, I really would love to see this happen next year, and I'm willing to help do it, because you want to be part of that planning over the summer, if at all possible. You might find that this needs to marinate for this year and then maybe next year, but they can appoint a committee at any time. So you don't necessarily have to wait till the start, but it's gonna be a little bit easier to start these things during the initial planning stages than later. But again, any step in the right direction is a positive step. So this first 30 days might vary a little bit depending on the time of year, but ideally, let's say that you consider your first date on August 1st. So we're, within 2 weeks of school starting. We want to get an email and flyer out to families that this exists. We want to promote, hey, there is an ESE community. This is our purpose. This is what we're going to be doing. This is how to get in contact with us, and that kind of stuff. You want to start getting messages out to your ESE staff and PTA officers. Make sure that you have an understanding of what they do, what they need. They have an understanding of what you're trying to do, so you can start that collaboration process. Beginning of school is going to be difficult to meet with some of the ESE staff because they are prepping, they're getting their rooms ready, they are getting their student profiles together. So you may not be able to get that to happen right away, but you might be able to get some luck, especially a couple weeks before school starts, because they may have some time to have a quick meeting or a Zoom or phone call. Otherwise, it depends on the school, so I don't want to promise anything for anyone, but you might find the beginning of the year is actually a little bit lighter for them. You might find it takes a month to actually get to sit down with them. In any case, we do want to have that conversation. If nothing else, we want to give them information and give them an opportunity to get back to you. If you have surveys that you're using, or you want to promote surveys from the school district or your school, Hillsborough County, they put out a survey every year. The Florida Department of Education has surveys that are specifically geared towards ESE families. They have other surveys that are geared towards everyone. We want to get those surveys out to people, make sure that they get filled out. We want to be represented in the responses. Some of that data your schools may get access to. Some of them they do not. The Florida Department of Education, they tend, at least in the last couple of years, they're not sharing a lot. So we don't have access to that. But the school district, they take surveys, they send that to the principal or maybe someone in their school. They may not give you the survey directly, but they might give you some insight on what things are being revealed. And you can build around that, because we do like to use data if we can, right? And then in the first 30 days, we want to look at 1 or 2 upcoming events that we can really focus on, and how can we make these more inclusive. At the beginning of the year, you're going to have quite a bit, hopefully, going on, because that's when families are prime. They're new to the school. They're looking for activities. They're looking for ways to get involved. If we can get involved with them early on, that's going to be very beneficial for the long term. And so, that first general meeting, make sure that they're announcing that you exist. Have a table set up if you can. Have flyers ready to send home, or whatever it is that would work. In the fall, you're gonna, you might have a fall fest, a welcome back event. You might have a curriculum night, whatever it might be. We want to get ready for those. And again, asking that question, how can we make this more inclusive? How can we make sure all of our families are represented? Now, the other sessions we talked about events and how to plan those. So just a quick recap of that really is making sure that we're providing preview guides, social narratives. That includes all the communication. Remember, you cannot over communicate the details. You can overfill a flyer, but you cannot give parents too much information. You might have to break it up into those FAQs or multiple flyers. Social narratives and things like that are huge helps. Work on creating some kind of quiet or sensory zone or sensory kit. If you can't do that, make sure we are communicating to families. Hey, there's gonna be a DJ, it's gonna be loud. Bring your noise canceling headphones. If you have the ability to have a space that deadens that sound, or you can move speakers or things like that, then figure out what you can do. Make sure we're using clear signage, flexible formats. It might be visual maps or visual schedules. You want to train your volunteers on being inclusive with the language, that that they are aware. Again, not necessarily of who, we're not giving out information about which students, and we really should treat all students with dignity and respect and inclusivity. But we want to kind of go over those things so that we're not creating any mistakes along the way. All right, so what happens month to month? This is going to get into that answer to the question, how much time's involved? So once you're up and running, ideally, this is the perfect world, you're attending your executive board's monthly meetings. That's right, if you are on a PTA board, you should be meeting monthly. Certainly there are times when that is harder to do than others, but there typically is a monthly meeting, and this is where a lot of the work is happening with your events and things like that. If you are a true committee chair, you should be part of those meetings, but every PTA kind of does this a little differently, or they might hold it in times you're not available. So you want to be there, or at least get your questions, ideas, and feedback involved. So you might have a point person that you contact, one of your vice presidents maybe, or the president directly. You want to check in with the ESE staff every month. Even something little, like, hey, this is what's coming up. Here's that social narrative that I told you we were making. Here's a, an event that you should know about, communicate with your families. Is there anything that you found that is going well? What could we do? Any kind of point of contact. You may find that monthly meetings are a little bit too much to handle. Some of our ESE staff, maybe they have a huge caseload, so it might be quarterly. But we don't have regular contact if we can. We want to plan our resources that we're sharing on social media, the website, flyers, newsletters, etc. I like to do this on a monthly basis, just a little bit easier to do it all, do a lot of it in one shot versus trying to keep up with it as it goes. And also trying to gather feedback from families. So whether you're putting out surveys, you're hitting your contact list, or having casual conversations with families in the pickup line, gather feedback of like, hey, what can we do to make this more inclusive? What needs are we not fulfilling? Follow up after events. That's an important one. Like, what worked, what didn't, what could be improved? So when you think about time commitment, this obviously can vary a lot depending on how your role is going to work at your school. Your monthly board meetings, those might be an hour or 2 hours long each month. So being a part of that meeting might already take up that time. Outside of that, I would expect a couple hours a month. Again, it can vary. Some folks may have much less than that, or some months might be a little bit lighter because the school is testing and the PTA is doing nothing. And this is a good time to kind of refresh your resource guides or just create a little meetup for families. You might find it takes a little bit more because it's a busy season. I know for us, September, we've got our membership drive. We have our fun run, fundraiser. We have Fall Fest is coming up. We have parent-teacher conferences in the first quarter. It's a lot. It's a very busy. I feel like from the beginning of school until our holiday shop, it is nonstop. So there's a lot of feedback to gather, but it also might be you're investing more time because you are planning, you are attending events, you are trying to make sure that they are inclusive and have everything that they need. So your PTA it's going to vary a little bit, but I'd expect a couple hours a month, 2 to 4 is a fair place to start. It could be more, and that's why we also want to build a team. So even though you may volunteer to be the chair of this committee, we are really trying to build a community where you have support from other folks, and hopefully your board is on board and they're helping you as well. But you may find you're alone to get started, and you'll do what you can. Any step forward is a good step. All right, common pushback and some real talk. These are not all the pushback you're going to get, but some of the ones that I've heard. No one volunteered to take on this role. We wanted to do it, but we couldn't find someone. I would always just ask, are you asking people personally to help, or are you just posting it out there? So there's a very big difference in what we call active recruiting versus passive recruiting. And in a lot of PTAs, we rely on passive recruiting for everything, for volunteers, for board positions, for committees, where we just post it, we put a flyer out there, and we just hope people will respond. It's much like fishing, where you just put something on a bobber or on your hook and just throw it in the water and hope something comes along. Sometimes that works, but that's not always the case. Active recruiting is going to people and saying, hey, can you help? Now, you may say, I don't want to do that at all, because that feels very pushy. That feels salesy, I don't want to bully people. No, we don't want that. We don't want someone doing something because they feel obligated to, but we do need to ask. So no one's volunteering. Let's start asking people if they can help. If you can take one for the team and work on it yourself and improve its viability, that it works, then it helps, you hopefully will get more people involved. You might hear someone say, well, we don't have ESE families. Yeah, you do. Just because you don't know who they are does not mean they don't exist. Now, some schools will have more than others, and the makeup of what those ESE families need, what kinds of support needs are there, it's going to vary wildly between schools. But if you have ESE staff, then you definitely have ESE families. If you have an AGP, gifted programs, you have ESE families. And if you don't have those, you still probably have ESE families. And making things more inclusive is never going to hurt, even if you don't have quote unquote like prime ESE families, because other families, even typical families with fewer or no support needs, will benefit. A PTA, this is one you're going to hear. We're too busy. I just told you about how busy the beginning of our year is. This is a good time to remind the PTA that inclusion is the work. Remember the mission to advocate for all children, all students. PTA's mission is not to hold the biggest bake sale. It is not to find a way to decorate a teacher appreciation luncheon. That is not the mission of PTA. Those are important parts. Don't get me wrong. If we're not raising money, we are not hosting events. We are not producing programs. If we're not appreciating our teachers, we may not be getting the best out of them. And those are very important parts. But the mission of PTA is inclusion. It is collaboration. It is advocacy. So if we're too busy for that, then are you too busy for the purpose of what our organization is supposed to be doing? The school won't support this. That is one we hear a lot. And, I put here, PTA has power. And I want to amend that a little bit just to say that often this is a misunderstanding of what we're trying to accomplish. You may have a PTA, a board, or a school. Everyone is saying, this sounds great. Yes, we want to be inclusive. We want to get all of our students involved. But when it comes time to do it, they may say, well, we can't send flyers home because we can't just contact ESE families. Like that would violate, some privacy things. Okay, maybe, depending on what you're talking about doing. They may say, well, our school never, they're not real inclusive. They're not going to, the PTA might say this to you. Well, PTA has power with the school. Ideally, your PTA and your school are partners and they're all working towards the same goal. That is not always the case. Sometimes schools and PTAs butt heads a little bit. Sometimes PTAs are ineffective or they're hanging on by a string. Sometimes schools have staff that, for whatever reason, this isn't their jam. They're not interested in inclusion. But the PTA does have advocacy power. PTA was formed as an advocacy organization. Things like kindergarten and hot lunches at school, those are things that PTA helped create. Is that to say you should have some kind of picket or protest? No, that's not the case, but you do have power. And as we talked about in our last session of advocacy and leadership, if you're finding you're not getting much support from the PTA side of things, that is when you join your school's advisory committee. That is when you take the parent school partnership class and learn how the system works and who the people are that you can talk to. You might find that you're talking to you're going to the principal when really you need to go to the guidance counselor. You might find that the ESE specialist isn't the right person because they're not decision makers, but the assistant principal is the perfect person to help get these things going, right? And ultimately, if you can show results, if you can have conversations about what this is and what this isn't, and we're here to help with that. Last year, I had several conversations with PTAs and families who wanted this to happen, and the leadership would say, wasn't it a violation of HIPAA? And we'd say, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what we're trying to do and what we're not going to do at any cost. Usually after you clear up some of the misunderstandings, they go, okay, yeah, let's try it this way. When we're able, we want to show results. We want to give the feedback from the families and say, thank you. We usually don't attend these events, but now we do because there was a quiet space. Or we love the way this was communicated to our families so we knew what to expect. When you can show that kind of feedback, you can build momentum. But ultimately, remember, PTA has its own voice. The PTA is not controlled by the school. PTA is not controlled by the Department of Education. Now, we certainly have to play by their rules. A partnership does not exist if we are butting heads and we're constantly defying our school's leadership. But we can move forward, even the school isn't quite ready to. If you have to kind of make events more inclusive on your own, you can do that because you're leading those events. Again, I'm not advocating at this point for some kind of huge resistance, But I'm saying don't get shut down just because there's a misunderstanding. Like, move forward, take those steps. You can make the difference. I want to point this out. You don't have to be the president of your PTA, but you do need to be present. And that means being at those meetings. It means emailing, calling, if you're not at meetings, making sure that those voices are being heard, represent those families. So even if this committee doesn't officially exist, you can take up the work. That's how I got into the role, because it didn't exist. And I was constantly asking those questions. I was constantly saying, hey, I made another flyer. If you guys want to share this, hey, I wrote a social narrative. This would be helpful, at least for my son, so others might enjoy it as well. And eventually they say, well, you're already kind of doing this. Why don't we just make it official? And then, kind of go from there. So you don't have to be in charge. Now, I will say that if you have ESE friendly board members, this whole process becomes much easier. And in fact, having an official committee might not be necessary if the people on your board are already thinking this way. That is something that if your board is interested or you're interested, we are working on trainings, just like these workshops that are meant specifically for local unit PTA boards, that will help them think like ESE parent reps, because that is a great position to be in. It may not be available to you. So being that committee chair or just that vocal parent might be the best place to get started. But as you move up and you advocate and you see success, you might find yourself in a leadership position where you can really enact this kind of difference and this kind of change. It really benefits schools and students. Give you a couple examples. So this year we worked with what I'll call pilot schools. These are schools that really were trying to embrace this PTA ESE Parent Rep program. Again, we had a list last year. We had around 50 schools that were interested in doing this. And just like every year, the boards change, interests change, parents are available or unavailable, and a lot of those kind of fall off. And so instead of repeating this every year, building up a momentum and then losing it, we decided to really focus in on some schools. So Deer Park Elementary, which is in the West Chase area, they have an ESE parent rep who's also one of the HC SIPTA board members. And one of the best stories I heard from them, along with some challenges, but one of the best stories is as they started bringing up more topics of conversation of inclusivity, it spread beyond just ESE students. It started to include things like, I believe they had in the past, they had events that were like a dad-son, what was it, a dodgeball game, and like a mother-daughter dance or something like that. I'm making these up a little bit, but they had something that like that. But they started asking questions like, well, what if some of the girls want to play dodgeball? What if some of the boys want to go to a school dance? Like, why are we segregating these things? Should we consider? And I don't know, maybe they didn't decide to combine those events just yet. But they started having conversations and asking, are we being inclusive? They might decide, yes, we do want to have a mother-son dance and a daddy-daughter donut day, or we want to have a son-father, or we want to have whatever it is, right? Those things are not wrong to have, but when you start having the conversations, that's a really good step to saying, are we being inclusive and what would benefit our community? You might find that every student wants to play dodgeball and no one wants to go to a dance, or every student wants to do both. You might say, okay, how can we start to incorporate these things? Schwarzkopf Elementary up in Lutz, so up the northwest corner of the county. This is one where they've been doing an excellent job adding some of these like sensory zones and communicating. So talking social narratives, talking about last year at their end of the year festival, they have like inflatable football throwing and soccer kicking, basketball shooting, things like that. Big festival, things that kids come and play. And it's a really big celebration at the end of the year. And they included a sensory zone, which was kind of the other side of the field. They put some blankets out, a pop-up tent, and they just put some board games out. Jenga, Battleship, just made it kind of a chill place. And they saw dozens of students and even teachers who saw that as an opportunity to rest, get away from the chaos, whether they had sound sensitivities or anxiety or they were had special needs or not, they were benefiting from that space. It was a huge success that we were saying, see how this works, and it cost nothing. We borrowed the blankets, picnic blankets. We already had some of the games and stuff. You can usually get those out of your own closet or find someone who has them to borrow. and create an area. I would recommend having someone kind of staff that area just to make sure that it is used the way you want it to. But ultimately, it was a great success. Turner Bartell K through 8, which is kind of in the north, center north, I don't know what to call it, part of the county. You may have heard of this PTA. They have 1,000 plus members. They're usually nationally recognized for their membership drives and the work that they do. And this is one that's great because from the board perspective, they're really trying because they have committee chairs, board members who are attuned to the ESE needs and those families. But this is one where they see the challenges of the school saying, we're not really comfortable sending out targeted communication. So building the community has been tough at that school, but the board is trying to do it anyway. It's a great example of if we can get the right people in leadership, we can still do the work. And then Sims Elementary, which is down in like the Riverview, Brandon area. This is a very unique one because their ESE Parent Rep program was actually started and is run by a staff member, one of the ESE specialists. So she has a different perspective and a different coming into this than a parent because she works for this school. And we talk about connecting the parent and the ESE team. She's already doing that. And so we're seeing really good considerations and conversations in the way that they plan their events. And because she has insight from the school side of things and from the PTA side of things, it really makes a big difference. And this is like your white whale. It's a hard one to get because our teachers are often just busy. And so to have them be in charge of something like this, like our rep there is incredible. And we love seeing what's come out of there. So as we finish up, there are some resources and we want to tap into that support. My dream, if I can share with you, is that we would have PTAs appointing these ESE parent reps who would kind of also be the representative of their schools to the Hillsborough County Special Education PTA. Now, of course, other people can join. We encourage all kinds of people to join and become members and support our mission. But to have that community where you are sharing resources and wins and loses and all those things from different schools could really help benefit everyone. That's kind of my dream. But we also have a free playbook and training templates and things that are available on our website. There's a QR code at the end, but it's just hcsepta.org. And you can see that. And again, we're constantly trying to add to that, and we're always taking recommendations or submissions. And you can always reach out if you want to brainstorm with someone. And the biggest thing is that you're not alone. Once we commit to doing this, we would love to stay in contact, not necessarily not follow up. We're not in charge of what you do at your school. We want to support what you're doing and we want to be a resource for you. So we would love to talk to you once in a while. How's it going? What's going well? What's not? What resources do you need? What resources are you using that are helping your students? Can you share them because other schools might benefit as well? So that support is there. In the past, we kind of got people amped up to do it and then we let them go on their own and it didn't always go well. But now we want to build this community district-wide and potentially even statewide as this starts to grow, because the idea and the acceptance of this is there. It's the implementation, and that's where we want to help. So what are your next steps? All right, bring this idea to your board. Again, look at your local unit. Are they having elections? Have they had elections? Then talk to them. Talk to the new board, right? Hey, this is something that I think we could benefit from, and let them know we're not alone. I'm not asking you to create a new program. I'm saying, can we join a movement that is happening across our district? Connect with your ESE team. Maybe they can help get things started. Choose what event is coming up. There might be an event at the end of the year, your last meeting, your PTA meeting. There might be an end of the year celebration, a festival. Maybe you're looking at back to school. See if you can start dropping hints in someone's ear, asking those questions. You might start small, that's okay, but stay consistent. If you're already on the board, this is an easy one to bring to your board and say, hey, I'd like to do this. You might start reaching out to parents to see if they have someone that would help head it up if you're not able to, or someone that can at least help you. But whatever it is, commit to doing it. It does not need to be perfect. We need to be present, right? And then here are some resources. I always recommend take a picture. You can just tap on the QR code to open it. So ESE SEPTA, that's our website where you can find information about becoming a member. You can find information about the ESE Parent Rep program, some of the advocacy work that we're doing, as well as our playbook. There is also a special education PTA for Florida. So this is a statewide SEPTA. They exist, currently it's just a Facebook page. This one kind of fell dormant for a little while, but they have a new board that were recently elected, and they will be meeting and come up with plans. And so I'm really excited about the potential for what could come out of that. And they'll most likely, they'll be, the people will be at the Florida Leadership Convention. So if you're able to attend, that would be a great place to meet some of these folks. I'll be there, so come say hi. And if you're interested in starting a SEPTA, now this is a, can go a couple different directions. You could start a SEPTA at your school. This, it does not have to be a large thing. So a special education PTA. If you're watching this and you're outside of Hillsborough County and maybe you don't have one, a district-wide one. In fact, if you're in Florida, as far as I know, Hillsborough County is the only county to have a countywide SEPTA. And then there's the SEPTA of Florida, which again was dormant, but is starting to see some life come back into it. You may say, hey, let's start one for our district. You might say, maybe I'm part of a private school. We're not really connected to the Hillsborough County Public Schools. You're still welcome to be part of our community, but you could start something like this at your local school. I hesitate with some of having too many different programs that are competing for memberships, but you might find this is the way to go. Or maybe your school doesn't have a PTA, but you do have a massive presence of ESE families, and this would be something more appealing to them. If you have students in high school, you might know what I'm talking about when there's PTA, FFA, BPA. Think of all the other acronyms out there, all these different programs, and they can kind of fight for resources. So starting a local SEPTA may not be the best choice for you, but it might be. And if you're someone somewhere else, another state or another county, you might find that starting one countywide is a fantastic way to go. And National PTA has resources on how to do that. So this is a great place to start. So again, thank you so much for being a part of this workshop or watching this video online. Just showing up and being part of this conversation, it means something. It means that you are willing and interested in taking a step, whether it's advocating, leading something, or just asking the right questions. And if you feel stuck or unsure what to do next, reach out. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. I'm gonna delete this. Reach out. You got the QR codes in the last slide. info@hcsepta.org. Those are all great places to get in contact with me and the SEPTA, or you can hit up National PTA or the SEPTA of Florida, and we can do this together. So again, thank you so much for being part of this. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, and